There are identical fortresses on every continent. Nobody agreed to build them. From the Netherlands to Japan, from Italy to the American coast, the same star geometry repeats across cultures that never made contact. Mainstream historians call it convergent military engineering, but when you examine the evidence structure by structure, that explanation starts to crack. Let us start where official history starts. According to textbooks, the Tres Italienne, the Italian style of angular fortification, emerged in the late 1400s as a response to gunpowder siege weapons. The Sangallo family and later Michelangelo are credited with early designs. From there, these fortifications supposedly spread across the world. The real architect of many early bastioned works was Donato Bramante, the man who designed St. Peter's Basilica in the Vatican. Michelangelo only added one upper bastion to the fort at Civitavecchia, yet the entire structure was attributed to him. And when you look at this so-called first star fortress, it is not even star-shaped. It is a classic medieval castle with slightly larger bastions. It bears no resemblance to the hundreds of perfect star fortresses found worldwide. Look at these two images side by side. A rough medieval upgrade on the left, geometric perfection on the right. These are supposed to be the same tradition. The Vatican itself is surrounded by two star fortresses. One is the main citadel enclosing St. Peter's Basilica. The other is a smaller star around Castel Sant'Angelo, where the rays now serve as a public park, Adriana Park. Look at the star fortress around Castel Sant'Angelo. The medieval castle clearly sits on top of it. The castle begins at the upper level of the star walls. The castle was built on the star, not the other way around. The star walls around Castel Sant'Angelo are barely half a meter to 1 meter above ground level, topped with earth. If these were military defenses, they would be ineffective. You could practically step over them. Ask yourself, would any military commander spend years building walls that an average person could climb over in 10 seconds? If these star points were designed for artillery defense, you need at least 800 meters of clear firing range around them. But what do we find around the Vatican fortress? Dense residential buildings on every side, some of them built as early as 1566, just 31 years after the supposed invention of star fortresses. The Church of Santa Maria in Transpontina was built just 183 meters from the star walls in 1566. It completely blocks the line of fire. Building that during an era of active artillery warfare would be a gift to any attacker. And here is a detail worth examining. Google Earth did not bother to render this star fortress in its 3D model. The castle is there. Every residential building around it is there, but the star fortress itself simply flattened out. It does not even have an official name, no historical designation. It is just called Adriana Park, one of the most geometrically precise structures in Rome, and it is labeled as a park. That was Rome. Now pull back to the global scale, because what you are about to see makes the Vatican look like a footnote. These star fortresses are found on every continent, and their geometric designs are strikingly similar, regardless of who supposedly built them or when. Bourtange in the Netherlands, Palmanova in Italy, Fort McHenry in the United States, Goryokaku in Japan. Different centuries, different civilizations, different continents, yet the same star geometry, the same angled walls, the same proportional rays. Now, mainstream military historians like John Lynn and Jeffrey Parker have documented the spread of the Tres Italienne across Europe. Parker's 1988 book, The Military Revolution, tracks how bastioned fortifications reshaped warfare. But even Parker admits the speed and uniformity of the spread is difficult to fully explain through normal channels of knowledge transfer. Think about what we are being asked to accept, that civilizations with limited contact independently adopted the exact same geometric fortification design, using the same engineering principles across thousands of miles and hundreds of years. If this were any other artifact, pottery, writing, metalwork, appearing identically across continents. We would call it evidence of a shared origin. Why is fortification architecture the exception? In Eurasia alone, the map is saturated with them. Western Europe, Eastern Europe, Russia, Turkey, hundreds and hundreds of these identical geometric structures stretching from Portugal to Siberia. But here is a pattern worth examining closely. The further east and south you go, the more these fortresses are buried. In Western Europe, Portugal, Spain, the Atlantic coast, almost 100% are stone and intact. Move east into Russia, and they become earthen mounds. Move further, and they vanish underground entirely. The intact stone fortresses sit on elevated ground, sometimes up to a kilometer above sea level. The buried ones sit in lowlands, at sea level. The pattern is consistent, elevation equals survival. Same design, same engineering. One stands in perfect condition, the other is buried under 3 meters of earth. Geology did not do this selectively. The Netherlands and Belgium have the highest concentration of star fortresses in the world, but they are almost all earthen, as if something moved across them from the direction of the North Sea, burying everything in its path. Let us visit one of these fortresses in person. In the Rostov region of southern Russia sits the fortress of St. Anna, a massive star fortress, 15 kilometers from Rostov-on-Don. We drove out to see it with our own eyes. Standing 50 meters from it, you would never know it exists. It looks like ordinary hills along the road. Only when you climb on top do you realize you are standing on 8-meter-high earthen walls, looking down into an enormous enclosed space. Inside, nothing. An empty flat field. No buildings, no foundations, no wells, no storage, no underground passages, not even rubble. Just wild watermelons and pumpkins growing in the silence, and foxes burrowing into the slopes. 8-meter walls. Zero infrastructure inside. What exactly was this built to protect? Official history says Empress Anna ordered its construction in 1730 and it was built in just 1 year. But when you search for the actual imperial decree, it does not exist. The Wikipedia entry citing this date was traced to one contributor, a radio engineer who worked in space communications. He published 3,700 articles in 8 years, likely using an automated process. He listed no source, and he has since passed away. The closest matching decree we can find is dated June 1st, 1730. It establishes a commission to inspect the condition of the army, artillery, and existing fortifications, and to repair them. Inspect and repair, not build new ones. The full text of that decree survives to this day. It discusses military ranks, horse provisions, uniforms, hospitals, and pay. Not a single word about building any fortress, not one mention of artillery placement. The title promises fortifications, but the text delivers none. So the fortress was not built by Anna, it was already there. And this pattern, rulers credited with structures they only repaired, repeats worldwide. Empress Anna did not build this fortress. The decree proves that at best she ordered repairs to something that already existed. The fortress was already standing before her reign began. This is not unique to Russia. When you dig into the construction records of star fortresses worldwide, the same pattern repeats. Local rulers are credited with building them, but the documentation is thin, contradictory, or entirely absent. Now let us address the central claim. The entire justification for star fortresses is supposed to be artillery defense. The angled walls deflect cannonballs. The star points eliminate blind spots. The flanking fire catches attackers in crossfire. This is the standard explanation you will find in Christopher Duffy's Siege Warfare and in Vauban's own treatises. The French marshal considered the greatest military engineer of the 17th century. Vauban perfected the star fort into a precise science. His designs are still studied at military academies today. That sounds logical on paper. But the heavy siege weapons of that era, the bombards, fired along arcing trajectories, not flat ones. A cannonball descending from above would not ricochet off angled walls. It would embed itself, causing maximum damage. Watch the physics. An arcing cannonball hits from above. The angle of the wall is irrelevant. The one thing these walls are supposedly designed for is the one thing they cannot do. And why aim at the walls at all? With arcing fire, you can shoot directly over the walls into the interior, destroying barracks, ammunition stores, and supplies. The star shape does nothing to prevent this. The flanking fire argument has problems too. To aim cannons down at attackers along the wall, you need to depress the barrel 20 to 30 degrees. Period cannons could not do that, and at 7 to 8 meters of wall height, the geometry simply does not work. History gives us a perfect test case. In 1790, Suvorov stormed the Star Fortress of Ismail, one of the most heavily defended in the Ottoman Empire. The defenders outnumbered the attackers, 35,000 to 32,000. The fortress was built to every standard of star fortification science. Suvorov took it in 3 hours. His battalions walked along the walls in the open. The flanking fire barely slowed them. The attackers lost 1,800. The defenders lost 26,000. So much for the military advantage of the star design. Every supposed military advantage of the star design failed in the one battle that should have proven its worth. The numbers do not lie. So, if the military explanation fails on physics, fails on geometry, and fails in actual combat, what were these structures actually designed for? Some researchers have proposed that these fortresses defended against a different kind of threat entirely, perhaps a directed pressure wave or force that traveled in straight lines. The angled walls would deflect that kind of energy where curved or flat walls would absorb it. That idea may sound unconventional, but it actually explains the geometry better than cannons do. A flat trajectory force, something moving straight, not in an arc, is exactly what these angled walls are optimized to deflect. Here is the engineering question. If you were designing walls to deflect something moving in a straight line at ground level, what shape would you build? Exactly this one. Now consider the Sant'Anna fortress again. It is enormous, but it has no internal infrastructure whatsoever. No wells, no barracks foundations, no underground storage. You could not even shelter from rain inside it, let alone survive a siege. According to military textbooks, the inner walls should have gun niches on all sides, but at Sant'Anna, the few niches that exist face random directions, leaving entire walls undefended. None of it matches the military manual. Some say the internal buildings were simply torn down. But think about that. Who demolishes perfectly good buildings inside a protected position? And even if someone removed the buildings, where are the foundations, the wells, the drainage? There is another possibility. What if the earthen walls are not the fortress itself? What if they are the result of something being buried, a real stone fortress underneath, covered by meters of sediment? On the left, what we see on the surface. On the right, what ground-penetrating radar suggests lies beneath. The fortress we visit may only be the shadow of the real one. Experiments with scale models confirm this is plausible. When a star-shaped structure is buried under sand or clay, the mound above reproduces the star geometry. The angles of the buried walls create corresponding ridges in the surface material above. A colleague built a miniature fortress model and buried it in sand. The result matched the prediction perfectly. The sand formed star-shaped mounds directly above the buried structure. The earthen walls we see today may be the tombstones of much larger constructions below. In Taganrog, just 130 kilometers from St. Anna Fortress, the evidence is visible to the naked eye. Every year the clay cliffs along the shoreline erode, exposing what lies beneath the surface, brick walls and paved streets about 3 meters down. This is not an ancient ruin, it is a street, a paved road with standard brickwork, buried under 3 meters of clay. And Taganrog is full of sites like this. So the gradient becomes clear. Western Europe's star fortresses survived on high ground. Eastern fortresses were progressively buried under deeper layers of sediment. Something moved across the landscape from a specific direction, covering everything in its path. We started with architecture, now we are looking at geology, and the geology is telling the same story the buildings are. Look at which regions survive with intact stone fortresses. Portugal, Spain, the Italian coast, the French Riviera. What do they have in common? Mountains between them and the flatlands to the east, the Alps, the Pyrenees, natural shields. And notice the correlation. The regions with intact star fortresses are exactly the regions that became the centers of European civilization: Italy, Iberia, France, the places that emerged from some unknown period with their infrastructure still standing. An 1871 engraving from the journal World Illustration shows the German city of Mainz. The city is surrounded not by military fortresses but by enormous star-shaped fences. 10-meter high barriers with the characteristic ray pattern. Packed so densely they overlap. These are not gun platforms. There is no room for a single cannon on top. They are walls and nothing else, angled star-shaped walls with no military function visible anywhere. These are just walls, angled star-shaped walls packed around the city. And on the riverside, the city is completely open, no walls at all. No military installation would leave its water approach completely unguarded. No walls on the riverside. Why would a city defending against an army leave its water approach unguarded? Unless the threat was not an army. Unless the threat came over land and water carried the danger away rather than bringing it closer. This brings us to the most provocative hypothesis. What if these star fortresses were not purely military? What if the rays, the pointed star shape, were designed to break apart a wave, not a wave of soldiers, a physical wave, a massive flow of liquid sediment? Consider the physics. Liquid clay is 1.5 to 2 times denser than water. A wave of clay would have immense force, but move slowly. The ideal defense? A series of angled points, like the bow of a ship, that split the flow and redirect it around a protected area. The moats around star fortresses, always full of water, would serve a critical function in this scenario. When liquid clay enters a still area, it begins to harden almost immediately. The water in the moat would keep the clay flowing, sliding it away from the walls. This also explains why many star fortresses have no walls facing rivers. If the flow is coming over land, the river is your drain. The sediment flows past the fortress and into the river. No wall needed on that side. Angle the walls. Water-filled moats, open riversides, sloped surfaces. Is this a military fort or a fluid dynamic solution? The gentle slope of the walls, which makes no sense for military defense, since soldiers could run straight up them, makes perfect sense for shedding viscous material. A steep wall would dam the flow, a sloped wall lets it roll over and away. Even the earth covering on top of many fortress walls fits this model. After the event, the clay that washed over the walls dried and hardened. The earth we see is not a design choice, it is the residue. And now the final piece. Because what is happening to these fortresses right now, in our century, may be the most revealing detail of all. Let us return to the global picture. Palmanova, Italy, a perfect 9-pointed star fortress, still fully intact. It sits on elevated ground in the northeast Italian plain, UNESCO World Heritage Site, officially built in 1593. Bourtange, in the Netherlands, a perfect star fortress sitting at sea level in the Dutch lowlands, restored, but the earthen mounds and water-filled moats are original. It is one of the densest clusters of star fortresses anywhere on Earth. Fort McHenry in Baltimore, USA, a 5-pointed star. Goryo-kaku in Hakodate, Japan, another 5-pointed star. Jaffna Fort in Sri Lanka. Fortresses in India, in Africa, in South America. The same geometry, planet-wide. Here is the architectural question worth asking. These fortresses require extraordinary geometric precision. The angles must be exact. The symmetry must be perfect. The engineering tradition behind them is singular, not something that evolves independently in a dozen cultures. Historians say the design spread through military engineering manuals, but Goryokaku in Japan was built during a period of deliberate isolation from the West. How did 16th century Italian military architecture end up in Hokkaido? And then there is the silence around these structures. The Vatican Star Fortress has no official name, St. Anna Fortress has no verified builder, and since 2018, something even stranger is happening. Starting in 2018, Google began blurring and obscuring star fortresses on its satellite imagery. At least 16 have been identified in France, Greece, and Italy, where the fortress is obscured or removed from the maps. Specifically, the star fortresses, not the buildings around them. 16 star fortresses across Europe, selectively hidden from satellite view since 2018. What kind of work is being done at these sites? Why would centuries-old earthworks suddenly need to be concealed? Remember, the Google Earth 3D model of Castel Sant'Angelo renders every apartment building around the fortress in perfect detail, but flattens the star fortress itself into nothing. That is not a rendering glitch. Somebody made a decision. So let us lay out what we actually know. Hundreds of star fortresses exist worldwide. They share identical geometry. Their construction records are consistently missing or retroactively assigned to local rulers. Their military purpose does not hold up to engineering scrutiny. The deeper you dig, the clearer the pattern becomes. A single engineering tradition produced these structures. They were not optimized for stopping cannonballs. Their geometry aligns more closely with fluid dynamics than with ballistics, and something is actively being done to obscure them. The Vatican, the most powerful religious institution on earth, sits inside one of these structures and cannot produce a construction date. The most well-documented organization in Western history has no paperwork for the walls around its own cathedral. Beneath the surface, 3 meters down in Taganrog, paved streets and brick walls wait in the clay, not ancient ruins, standard construction, buried by something that mainstream geology has not yet accounted for. The real questions are not about cannons or military tactics. They are much bigger. Who had the engineering knowledge to build hundreds of identical geometric structures across every continent? What event were these structures designed to withstand? And why, right now in the 21st century, are these structures being hidden from satellite imagery and omitted from 3D maps? If they are just old military architecture, why does anyone care? What is being found at those 16 sites in Europe? Somewhere beneath the fields of Russia, beneath the parks of Rome, beneath the lowlands of the Netherlands, the real star fortresses may still be waiting. Not earthen mounds, but the stone originals, meters underground, built by someone history has yet to